Greetings, everyone. This is Ehav Ever from the Chronicles of Ehav Ever, and today's video is going to be concerning the topic of a convergence of facts, the scholarly way to analyze Torah. Now, this video is going to focus just on the steps that are used when basically analyzing anything that's supposed to be an idea that either is found in the Torah or is claimed to be from the Torah. So, step one, a review of the original text in the language it was originally written in. This serves as the first-hand source of the claim. The original language of the text is the authoritative source for review and not a translation of it. Simply put, that if a concept is said to be from the Torah, a person can't pull out a translation and say, here it is right here. No, a person goes to the original text. And this is one of the reasons that Jews teach children at a young age how to interact with the text, how to understand it, and all the various elements around it. Because again, the idea is that any written text, for example, has what you could even say in English is subtext, and also has oral understandings of it that are required in order to have an understanding of it. But you always have to start at the original text. There's no such thing as starting at a translation. There's no such thing as starting in a text that's like a derivative text. You start at the original, especially when the original is available. So step number two is a comparison of the most ancient first-hand sources. What this means is that all Torah text point back to a common source. And the reason for that is very simple. Because when you look through all of Jewish history and you look through all the Jewish communities around the world, you'll find that all Torah texts point back to a common ancestor text, if you will. And this means that, one of the things a person does is after they have an understanding of the source material, you basically go and compare all the different texts that exist that are from that text or are claimed to be historically from it. And this basically allows a person to be able to say, okay, I can see that these variants exist or don't exist, for example, and that these commonalities exist. And that allows for the analysis to continue. So step number three is to review all additional historical and archaeological support documents. What this means is that, okay, here's a Torah, a Sefer Torah, and you're trying to analyze what's in the text, once you have an understanding of how to read it on its basic sense. Well, you're also going to have to look at other support documents, other texts that exist around the world from the Jewish communities that, give an explanation or give additional information to analyze the information. I mean, so for example, if you find a mezuzah, mezuzahs have information from the Torah written directly into them. So if you find a mezuzah from 2,000 years ago, that gives you, analysis of the current text that exists as it is today. The same thing for tefillin. Tefillin have text into them from the Torah directly, and you can test and see, okay, is the text exactly as it is in the current day Torahs? And if the mezuzah or the tefillin are like, let's say, from the Dead Sea region and they're more than 2,200 years old, you can see that the same information that was there during that time exists today. Further to that, if you find from other cultures or, around the region that we're looking at, information that is found in, different, you could say like archaeological digs and things like that, that also allows you to be able to say, okay, here are the connections between these things. These are the questions we have to ask. These are the conclusions that are confirmed. For example, the Jewish community says this about the text. Here all of a sudden is a Moabite stone where the Moabites wrote something and they say the same thing, or they say a variance of it, or they have the same information of kings, chronologies, things like that. So step number four would be a comparison of the most ancient first-hand source textual variants. The main one when it comes to the Torah would be comparing Torath Mosheh Jewish Torah scrolls compared to Samaritan Torah scrolls. There's about 6,000 differences between the Samaritan Torah and a Jewish Torah. Most of those differences, and you've heard me talk about this in other videos, are basically choices in words, but there's a few of them that, are there's like two of them that are is a pretty major one, and it's either that someone either took something out or put something in. And you look at the history of each group to see which one makes more sense if they did this or that. And also these variants allow a person to be able to analyze, okay, which, if these are the only variants that exist, this tells us that at some point, whatever text both of these texts came from was either this or that, and one group simply either subtracted or added something because of some either maybe political situation. Now, step number five would be to review the most authoritative sources for understanding the original. What this means is, okay, you've got the text, you've got all the variants, you've got all of the archaeological information. Who are the most authoritative sources of, the understanding of the text? So for example, if someone were to say, I want to understand an ancient, ancient Hebrew text from several thousand years ago, an ancient Ivri text, do I go to the Siberians? Do I go to the Mongolians and ask them what they think about it? Well, they have no connection to the text. Do I go to the British, and try to find out from them? Do I go to the Christians and Muslims? No, you go to the people who have had the text and it's from their culture. So, for example, when it comes to the Torah, you've only got three directions you can go with that. That's with Torath Mosheh Jews, which you see on the left, with Karaites, which you see in the middle, and Shomronim, which you see on the right side. These are the only three groups that can ancestrally make a claim to have come, having basically been from the people who received the Torah in ancient times. So essentially what that means is that even if you were to try to go to some modern movement and say, okay, well, let me look at what the reform movement or the conservative movement says, or this movement, that movement, well, if they can't be traced back, you could say, okay, genealogically, in terms of genetics, maybe someone can go back, but in terms of the information that they hold by, are their concepts ancient? And you'd have to be able to trace it back to a path that gets you back to Mount Sinai. And there's only three groups that can get you there. And like I said before, that's Jews who hold by the Torah, not like a modern group that, started 200 years ago, 100 years ago, so on and so on. But, the Karaites and then the Samaritans, those are the only three groups. And that's, where you would have to start. Next, you would have to look and say, where are the most ancient locations? Step five is review the most authoritative sources for understanding the original. Again, that's, okay, where are the most ancient locations that Jews were outside of the land of Israel? Because if there was an exile, which we know there was, where did Jews go right after the exile? So what you see on this map in the red locations are the earliest, locations of the exile. And then you see in the yellow or the next step. Now when I say next step, it kind of means it took a little bit longer to get there. So for example, there's stories of the fact that the exile from Jerusalem led to Jews being in Spain, and essentially that they got there. But of course, they would have had to have been brought there or traveled there to get there because it's not as close as, let's say, Egypt, or Turkey, or Syria, these areas, Arabia, things like that. So this is where a person would start. A person can't ignore these ancient Jewish communities and say, oh, I'm going to skip to some community that started, let's say, 20 years ago and see what they say. No, you have to go to the oldest, most ancient communities. Step number six is to review internal sources from those who have a history with the source text. So what this means is that all the people I mentioned earlier, the three groups, you would essentially have to look at the most reliable of those three groups and say, okay, well, what are the internal sources? What do they say about all of this information? Let's say I have a question about a part of the Torah. What does the Talmud say? Is there information in the Mishnah? What does the Rambam say? What does the Shulchan Aruch? What is the Bavli Talmud versus the Yerushalmi Talmud say? What does Rav Dagon say? What does the Ramban say? So you look at all of these sources and you basically combine their knowledge and their information about the topic and make a decision and say, okay, I've got all the different players involved. This is all the valid information from at least, several thousand years ago till now. And I can make my decision based upon that. And then step number seven would be to review secondary sources, texts from the surrounding cultures, meaning that, when a person says, okay, you had Canaanites that were around, and I did a video about the Canaanim, concerning how it's understood of who was a Canaani and also the questions around that. But all the archaeological information that's not directly from a Jewish source, you analyze that to see what they say. There may be things in ancient Egyptian information that answers certain things that are mentioned in Jewish information. And again, a person would have to look at the source material, not just simply someone's, a description, or even someone saying, "Oh, this doesn't exist." And then you look and say, "Okay, wait a minute. What about this papyrus over here that says this?" Oh, okay, there is something, but no, I don't want to connect that. I don't want to make the connection. That's where a person would have to look at these extra sources. Okay, so step number 8 is the model for analyzing Torath Mosheh facts. So it's basically the same as the scientific method, the westernized, I would say, scientific method. And this is the method that has been used in ancient Jewish communities for thousands of years. This isn't like something new, and this isn't really something I invented. That a person basically starts with a question, whether it's halakha or a concept. Um, And then a person has to trace it through what its sources are. Is it something from the oral traditions, from the rabbis, from family, for community leaders? Is it from halakhic sources such as the Talmud, the Mishnah Torah, Shulchan Aruch, Sefer Mitzvot Agadol, things like that? Is it from archaeology? Then we take it to the next step and say, okay, question: is it ancient? Is it authoritative? Is it authentic? And if the answer is no, then you can say, okay, well, that's a modern personal community tradition, or we call it minhag, or just a modern concept. It's not something that's ancient. It's just something that modernly came about for whatever reason. But if the answer is yes, then you can say it's an ancient Masorah, and then you retest it and revisit it daily, weekly, and yearly. So this means that there is no such thing as, okay, well, I figured the answer out. I'm done. Ultimate truth has been achieved. No need to do anything else. No, anything that even if we accept it and know it to be true, we take it back through the process and go through the whole process over and over again. And this is one of the reasons that we go and learn the Torah every year from start to finish over and over again so that we can question it, go through the sources, determine if it's ancient, authoritative, and authentic, and then take it through the process until the day, we die, basically. And this is one of the reasons that a Jewish man, for example, has a requirement to learn Torah at set times every day from the time that he is a child to the time that he basically passes away. And this is the goal, to be able to take it through this process over and over again. And that's one of the reasons I keep championing the idea that you have to be able to read original sources. You can't simply say, okay, well, here's some scholar who claims this, because I've read, information from different Western scholars who've said something, and I looked up the actual information myself. I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't say that. It says this instead, or they didn't add this there, or they left out this Jewish community who has this to say about it. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal here is the truth, facts versus fiction. I remember once on a forum, someone like criticized the video before they even watched it because of the fact that my video started out with this particular set of terms, and they were like, "Oh, anybody who tries to claim the truth, I don't buy it." Well, first of all, the video doesn't claim the truth; it just simply has the word truth in it. Because at the end of the day, there are things that are false and things that are true. That's just reality. I mean, you go to a auto mechanic and say, "Hey, are my tires okay?" And if they're not, and he says, yes, they're perfectly fine, well, that's not the truth. That's false. And there always is false and there's always true. And it's just a matter of person having to investigate to determine what the truth is. And that's the ultimate goal here. And that's why I say that the idea of religion, as people bring up sometimes, is completely out of the scope here. Because with religion, you could be a part of a false religion and still be a religious person, 100%. You could be a person who is following, a religion that's truth, and be doing it in a false way. I mean, but if a person is looking towards an issue and saying, okay, what is the fact? What are the facts? I don't need like the belief system. I need the facts. What actually happened here? That's the ultimate goal of the Torah of Torath Mosheh. So this is Ehav Ever from the Chronicles of Ehav Ever. Thank you for listening, and take care, and bye.